Alright, settle in because this isn't a quick story. This is something that's been sitting in the back of my mind for years. And even now, talking about it makes my chest feel tight. It all started when I was about 25 or 26. This was before I met my wife, before kids, before I had any real responsibilities beyond paying rent and showing up to work on Monday. Back then, I used to take solo backpacking trips a few times a year, usually somewhere deep in the Appalachian region. I loved being completely off the grid. No signal, no notifications, no people. Just trees, mountains, and silence. My friends thought I was crazy for going alone, and maybe they were right. But at the time, it felt freeing more than dangerous. One of those trips took me into the Cherokee National Forest. I'd already been out there for 2 days and everything had gone perfectly. Cool weather, quiet trails, and not a single person in sight since the first morning. That kind of isolation was exactly what I went out there for. Late in the afternoon on day 2, though, I noticed dark clouds rolling in fast from the west. At first I wasn't worried. I'd hiked through rain before. But within an hour the wind picked up hard. The temperature dropped fast enough that I had to stop and add a layer, and then the sky just opened up. It wasn't gentle rain. It was violent. Branches were cracking somewhere above me. Lightning was striking way too close for comfort, and I was standing at elevation with a metal-framed pack on my back. I started looking for shelter immediately. I was in a pretty exposed section of trail, so I pushed forward, soaked through, scanning both sides of the woods for anything that could offer cover. That's when I saw it. Through the trees off to my left, partially hidden by brush, was a small structure. I cut off trail toward it, and as I got closer, I realized it was a tiny one-story cabin. It looked old, not historic in a charming way, more like forgotten. There was one window on the side facing me. I didn't hesitate. I ran up to the door and pushed it open. Inside was dim but dry. There was a chair, a small table, a cot frame against the far wall, and a stone fireplace clogged with ash. The air smelled musty and sour, but at that moment I didn't care. I stripped off my soaked outer layers and sat on the floor just trying to get my body temperature back up. For the first 15 minutes, I was just grateful to be out of the storm. The rain pounded on the roof so loudly it drowned out everything else. When I finally started really looking around with my flashlight, that's when things started to feel off. In the corner near the cot frame was a rolled-up sleeping bag. It didn't look as old as the rest of the place. On the table were a couple cans and plastic water jugs. So someone had been using this cabin at some point. That alone wasn't alarming. Remote shelters sometimes get used by hikers or hunters. But then I noticed the wall next to the door. There were scratches. Dozens of them. Some shallow, some deep. No pattern. Just frantic gouges in the wood. I stepped back and studied the door. It had a simple latch inside. Curious, I opened it again and examined the frame more closely. There was a heavy metal bracket mounted on the outside, clearly designed for a padlock. There was no matching mechanism inside. If that door was locked, it would be locked from the outside. That thought alone made my stomach tighten. I shut the door slowly and walked to the window. The glass was intact, which surprised me. But then I noticed screws drilled into each corner of the frame from the outside, sealing it shut. Along the inner edges were deep scratches, the kind you'd leave trying desperately to pry something open. That's when it hit me all at once. Someone had been trapped in that cabin, locked in. Against their will, I should have left right then. But the storm was still raging. Lightning cracking somewhere close enough to feel in my chest, and I convinced myself whatever had happened was long in the past. So I stayed. I don't know how much time passed. Maybe an hour. The rain only intensified. That's probably why I almost didn't hear the first scraping sound along the exterior wall. At first, I told myself it was just a branch. Then I heard two heavy thumps on the porch. Those didn't sound like storm debris. I stood up and froze, trying to separate the noise of rain from anything else. My eyes drifted to the window, but I couldn't bring myself to look through it. If someone was out there, they could be staring back. Then came the sound that changed everything. Pressure against the door. Not knocking, not rattling. Just steady weight pushing against it from the outside. The wood creaked. The latch vibrated once. Then the pressure lifted. My heart was hammering so hard it felt painful. And a thought surfaced that made my blood run cold. If someone was out there, why not just come in? The door wasn't locked. Unless they didn't want to come in. Unless they wanted me inside, that was enough. I started stuffing my gear into my pack as fast as I could. I had the overwhelming sense that something terrible was seconds away. I was maybe half a minute from reaching the door when the window behind me shattered. Glass exploded inward. Something came flying through, and in the next instant the entire wall ignited. Flames spread unnaturally fast. The heat hit me like a physical blow. I lunged for the door and it wouldn't move. It had been jammed from the outside. Panic took over. I threw my full weight against it again and again until the hinges tore free and the door collapsed outward. Taking me with it into the mud, I scrambled up and ran blindly into the woods, rain and smoke mixing in the air. I hadn't made it far when something tackled me from behind. I hit the ground hard with someone on top of me. He tried to wrap an arm around my neck. I clawed at his face, kicked, twisted, anything to get free. He was yelling incoherently. I managed to break loose and ran again without looking back. Behind me I could hear screaming, and through the trees, the cabin fully engulfed in flames. I didn't stop until my legs gave out. I crawled under a pair of fallen trees that formed a small dry pocket and stayed there for hours, shaking and trying to breathe. Eventually I forced myself to move. I stumbled onto a trail and somehow made it to a trailhead. The first person I saw drove me to a hospital. I had second-degree burns and smoke inhalation. The police took my statement, but there wasn't much they could do. The cabin was ash. No suspects. No answers. I never told my wife the full story. I just stopped hiking alone. But that wasn't the only time the woods left me with questions. Years earlier, in my early 20s, I had a friend named Charles who loved exploring abandoned places. One weekend, he found an old decommissioned fire lookout tower deep in a forest a few hours away. He was convinced we could hike out, climb it, and spend the night at the top. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We found it late Friday afternoon. 70 feet of rusted steel rising above the trees. No fence, no signs, just standing there. We climbed carefully, the final stretch a vertical ladder enclosed in a narrow metal cage. The view from the top was unreal. Endless forest in every direction. We sat on the wraparound platform watching the sunset, drinking a couple beers. After dark, the forest below became a solid black mass. No lights anywhere. At one point, Charles smacked his metal water bottle against the tower, sending a loud, echoing clang into the night. I got annoyed, but then we both saw it. A light moving through the forest far below. It wasn't swinging like a flashlight. It moved steadily, smoothly, and it was coming toward us. It got closer until it stopped directly beneath the tower. We couldn't see who was holding it. Charles yelled down. No response. The light didn't move. After nearly 30 minutes, it suddenly vanished. That should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. We retreated inside the cab and decided to stay awake. About 20 minutes later, metallic clangs echoed up the structure. Not footsteps. Metal striking metal. Then grinding sounds like bolts being twisted. The noises shifted around the base. Then I saw a dark silhouette pass across one of the windows. Close, too close. We pressed ourselves against the door and didn't move for hours. At sunrise, we opened it. No one there. But as we descended, we discovered an entire section of staircase had been removed during the night. Not broken, removed. We had to jump the gap to get down. We never found the missing steps, and then there was Boone National Forest, years later. First night I saw a distant campfire through my tent wall. In the morning, there was no trace of it. Second night, 2 massive trees fell in different directions with no wind. Then came a low, continuous rumbling growl I couldn't identify. At dawn, I found one of the fallen trees. The trunk wasn't snapped clean. It was gouged, torn apart like something had ripped into it. And near the branches were my blue bandana and carabiner, both missing from my pack. Something had gone through my gear while I slept. I left immediately. To this day, I don't know what any of it means. The cabin, the tower, the trees. Maybe they're unrelated. Maybe not. I still camp sometimes, but never without being hyper-aware of every sound, every flicker of light in the distance. Because once you felt that shift, that moment when the woods stop feeling empty and start feeling occupied, you never forget it. And sometimes the most terrifying part isn't what you see. It's the realization that something out there has already seen you. It's the realization that something out there has already seen you.